the Agile brand.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast, now part of the Agile Brand Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and I am so glad you're here. I empower leaders to delight their customers, and I talk to guests with a wide range of expertise who share meaningful insights, wisdom, and practical tips that you can use immediately. I'm also excited to announce the Trusted Guide Roadmap Masterclass for CX leaders who struggle with executive buy-in and are ready to go beyond CX fundamentals. The Masterclass gives you proven frameworks and takes you step by step through a 4-step model that will move you past the frustration of not getting your work done. It's unique because it's live, interpersonal, hands-on, and we give you tools and templates to help you build your CX roadmap. To learn more, visit empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. And now on to the show. Well, I can't wait to get into this conversation on today's episode of the Delighted Customers Podcast with Ron Holt. A fascinating story. I can't wait to share how he has used customer experience as a differentiator and in his journey along. And we're going to talk about really how it evolved from one company that he franchised to his current organization and the tremendous success he's had in what you would think would have been a commoditized industry, both of them. So Ron, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, Mark, I'm so glad to be here and can't wait to share more of my story with everyone.
So thanks, and an honor to have you. So we're gonna talk a little bit about how you got into doing what you're doing today. If you don't mind, share just kind of how you got to where you are, what it is you're doing today.
Yeah, so I am currently the founder of a moving brand called Pink Zebra Moving. Kind of a weird, funny name, but there's a whole story behind why it's a weird and funny name that relates to our business model. But I, over the years in my professional adult life, have come to love the art of home services and kind of dove into home services forever ago, now 20 plus years ago, and never left it. I dreamed of one day being the next Tom Brady. And when that failed, said, let's go clean houses and move people. And it's turned out to be a better decision than football.
Well, and I know you and I talked before about that you're a Bulldog. You're from Georgia, Bulldogs fan, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs, but now living in what you say, enemy territory.
Yeah, I'm in the thick of it here. My wife's from Birmingham, Alabama, and as I was building our first brand, Two Maids and a Mop, into a franchise brand, we were trying to select headquarters, which was going to be Atlanta, because at the time that was the middle of our footprint. But my wife made a strong case for Birmingham, and here we are. Made it a home and enjoy it here. It's a great place to raise a family and build a business.
Yeah. So, all right, now tell us how you started. It was originally Two Maids and a Mop. Tell us how that got started and what made you kind of think about using franchises as a model, number one. And number two is, how did you think about using CX as a differentiator?
Sure. All right. So I'll try to be succinct here because this goes back more than 20 years now. But it expands over 2 decades because Two Maids and a Mop started with a single store in Pensacola, Florida, and we built it into almost 100 locations before I sold it a few years ago. That journey took all of 19 plus years. And so it was a heck of a journey, to say the least. And, going back to those early days, I was the quintessential small business owner. I had this dream to build a service-based brand. I wanted to scale that little small business, that small cleaning company, into a national brand. And at the time, during those early days, I just thought it was going to be through a corporate growth strategy. I didn't really think about franchising at the time. I didn't know a lot about it, but the things I knew about it were not necessarily positive. And so I was scared of franchising. So we built 12 corporate stores, all in the Southeast, from Florida to the Carolinas. And we had our hiccups. Early on, it took 2 years for me to earn a profit. It took 3 years for me to earn a paycheck. And along the way, during those 2 or 3 years, it wasn't just about losing money. It was all sorts of mistakes and just complete nightmares in some cases, and a lot of reasons to quit. Like every business owner faces
Yeah.
that question at some point. But eventually
Yeah.
we figured some things out and we grew those 12 corporate stores, and things were going really well until I sort of hit this wall where we didn't really have the proper systems or infrastructure in place to support that type of growth. We had kind of stopped growing because we just couldn't grow anymore. We were already kind of strapped. Our corporate office was 2.5 people at the time. So
Mm.
we had 200 plus employees across 5 states supported by 2.5 people. So it just was,
Mm.
looking back on it, obviously a bad idea. But at the time, we just felt like that's the way it was supposed to go down. I wanted all the money to be in the field, the network, instead of the home office, and that was the reason we just sort of made those decisions early on. But it took a chance encounter with one of the legendary guys in this industry. I met Subway founder Fred DeLuca at a franchise conference in Vegas many years ago now, and that meeting led to a lot of just self-discovery on how franchising could be beneficial to a brand and how you can maybe not have so many of those negative things that I'd sort of connected this world to. And so once we entertained the idea of franchising, I'd always knew franchising was going to generate fast growth, but I was concerned what it would do to relations with our owners and what it would do in terms of uniformity, in terms of brand offering, service offering. But what I learned that you can build a strong brand that doesn't just grow quick, but also grows quick with cash flow for your franchise owners, then we hit a whole nother level of growth. It was unbelievable, honestly. And we went from just those 12 stores to just a few years later to having more than 50 locations across the country, really from coast to coast, from California to Florida. And continued that growth for the next several years until year 19, when we were getting close to location number 100. I sort of had these self-reflection moments where I was looking in the mirror and asking myself questions. Is this the American dream that I had hoped for? Is this what I wanted when I was a young adult looking into the future and hoping for something bigger? And there was some guilt associated with some of my answers and responses because it wasn't what I wanted. There were some things that I was really unhappy with in terms of the culture inside the business. The DNA had shifted from small business entrepreneurship to corporate, which is for an entrepreneur a bad word. So
Yeah.
that's the whole reason I started a business in the first place was to get away from corporate America. But it was pretty clear that's what had been created, whether I recognized it or not while it was being formed. And so tell me if you need me to stop for a second, because I could keep going. But
No, no, that's really interesting. I wanna pull out some of the gems because to you they might be part of the story and set maybe second nature by right now. But I want to just double tap for the audience on a couple of things you said. And one of those, and this is not an entrepreneurial show, but one of the things that you talked about was kind of operating like almost like a forgive me, but mom and pa shop, and but you're actually getting bigger and you're scaling and you're growing and you kind of hit this wall. Good intentions trying to distribute and give resources out to the field. But at the same time, you got kind of in this lockjam where I'm unable to really provide the level of service that's desired for the people in the field
right.
because it's a 2.5 person. So there's a lesson in there somewhere. How would you, like, if someone was thinking about growing a business, whether it was franchise or a corporate, what advice would you give them when it comes to that?
So I'm in round two now. I can't wait to tell you more about round two, our moving business. But what I'm hoping that we can do differently here is, and it sounds like a big buzzword that everybody hears all the time, but we do need you do need the right kind of culture in place. And when I say the word culture, it's an expectation, a way of life, something you do because you want to do, not because you're forced to do it. all of those things sort of encompass this culture word that I just used. And so for your business to continue to be small but big in nature, I think that you've got to instill that from day one, that that's who we are going to be. That's who we are. And it's not negotiable. And so when I'm talking to our people now here in our home office in Birmingham with Pink Zebra Moving, that's a directive that we'd have a meeting every Tuesday morning, and that's how I lead off the meeting. Every Friday afternoon, I talk to our franchisees across the network and say the same thing. And so I'm saying those words so that somebody will hear those words and know who we are. And so that's how I've chosen to attack it this time. The first go around with two mates, I just worked, and kept working and kept working, and things happened, around me that sometimes I wasn't really detecting until afterwards I reflected on it and saw it. And so that's what happened. I look back over the course of a 19-year period, and there were still a lot of good things. Our franchisees were growing still; they were making money. We had a lot of people in the home office where we had created employment opportunities for them, and their lives were impacted in a positive way. And so there was a lot of good things. Heck, my own life was impacted in a positive way. I was working less than ever before and making more money than ever before, so a lot of good things. But not everybody, I shouldn't say that, but there was this feeling of corporate America inside those walls where we had to have a lot of meetings. We had to be very, very bureaucratic with decisions. We had to complain about this person, to me on Tuesdays, and it just was icky to me, and so I've made it clear here that those are real things. If there's an issue with a coworker, let's talk about it. But I don't want a lot of meetings. We have one meeting a week here. That's the only one we'll have. And we try to be as entrepreneurial as we can be, not just in the early days, but hopefully even later on as we keep growing.
Yeah. And you had despite what you described, I would describe it as bumps and bruises along the way. Some good learnings, but in 20 years, less than 20 years, you scaled it from one store cleaning business to $40 million nationally recognized brand with 90 locations across the country. So at the end of the day, it was a success. Tell me about the transition that you made more recently to leave that piece behind and what triggered this Pink Zebra Moving, and then we'll get to the name.
Yeah, so it was a combination of a few factors, like big decisions always are. So step one was this, again, self-reflection that I was missing something, that personally I wasn't being as fulfilled as I had hoped and dreamed as a young adult. And so that led me down a few things, or at least a road to think about a few things. At the same time, we were in the not height of COVID, but pretty close to the peak of COVID. We were in 2021, and so times were good in terms of cleaning services, and revenue was rolling in. But when we had a lot of KPIs, one of those KPIs is customer retention. There was a red flag with that particular KPI data point, and I was worried that once the wave slowed down from this COVID demand, that KPI would rear its head and we would have some issues. And so I'm, again, very entrepreneurial. And so I didn't mind standing up in front of our network virtually at the time and say, hey, we have a problem. And, it wasn't the world's best response, because it was a bit of a get off my porch type situation, because they were making more money than they ever made. Looked like the growth was going to go through the roof because we were growing like I'd never seen before. And most people were working less than they had ever worked before. And so telling someone that we got a problem, we got to fix, and that's going to require change, potentially even investment, was not a well-received, piece of wisdom. And so
Right.
I had to make a real decision there. Like, what do I do? Do I dig my heels in and say, well, this is my way or the highway? Because I think we have some loyalty issues in this business, because our business there was very much built on recurring revenue. You hire us today, then you come back in 2 weeks and do it again. And if there's a termination or if there's a cancellation, there's no contract. You can cancel at any time. And so we were seeing some of that, unfortunately, even though, again, revenue was strong. And so I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of fight because, again, I'm a big fan of, I'm a people pleaser by nature. And so I didn't necessarily want to have this big world war. I just didn't feel like that was and something I wanted to do when we were at the best of times from a revenue perspective. And so I had to figure out what to do. And I didn't know if I sold the business what I would do next. I'd always loved home service and had always been on the lookout for other home service based opportunities, but I just couldn't find anything that was what I call disruptible until my mother in law, of all people, hired a local moving company right here in Birmingham, Alabama. It was, in a word, a nightmare. It was just really bad. Everything
Mm.
that you may have think of when you think bad moves happened to her and then some. Um, Price was much higher than she thought, damaged items, unprofessionalism. They laughed at her
Mm.
toward the end of the service. It was hard, but she was very emotional about it.
Mm.
And so when that occurred, I said to myself, well, I wonder if that's happening in other markets with other moving companies. I had relatively little experience with moving companies, other than it was okay. We had hired some people, they'd been okay, but nothing crazy. And I knew people in this industry that seemed to be doing well, but her experience was so poor, yet she still had to give them a lot of money that I thought if that is happening in other markets, that to me sounds like an opportunity.
Yeah.
So what I did, I just started searching. I went to Yelp and I checked out 3 markets. This is not the most well-researched thought process here, but I went to 3 markets, Seattle, Omaha, and Miami, and I went straight to the one-star reviews, read those reviews. They all, for the most part, matched my mother-in-law's experience.
Mm.
And that was enough validation for me to know that there was a problem in this industry and decided on that day, while staring at those one-star Yelp reviews, that I would sell the business, sell 2 maids, and go all in on Pink Zebra Moving. So, and it made me feel great. Like, as scary as that sounds, as risky even as that sounds, it made me feel so much different.
Hmm.
And maybe it's because I'm just a startup entrepreneur by heart. I don't know, but I felt different immediately once I made that discovery about myself that that's what I was going to do.
Mm. So interesting. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense, you got some clarity where you were struggling with what you knew needed to be the issue that needed to be faced with franchise owners about what was coming, and you didn't feel good about going into battle because you were a people pleaser a little bit.
Yeah.
And here's this opportunity that you see, and also you talked about like lessons learned the first time. I guess you now the second time you're going to get a chance to do it right from the get-go.
That was the plan. Yeah. I was really amazed. When you think of like what you want your business to be, literally from day one at 2 Maids, I wanted to build a nationwide brand. But the reality of that is a different beast. And so when you're there and you look backwards, and we had built this into one of the top 3 most well-known residential cleaning brands in the country. That's unbelievable. Even when I say that now, it's unbelievable. And so we built that literally one home at a time. And so there are so many great things to reflect on. But at the same time, you look back and you see some things that you wish you could have done differently, and that is kind of weird to say because most people think business just happens and there's just lots of good luck and hard work. There's a lot of that, but there's a lot of mistakes that you just have to overcome. And so I wanted to sort of reflect on that. And so I spent a while, several weeks actually, just sort of reflecting on the experience. And after that, told my wife, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's do it again. And she said, oh my God, are you kidding me? But we jumped right back in. We started a moving company in Birmingham. I didn't start franchising was a long way away at that time because we needed to know how to move. We didn't know how to make money moving. We didn't know how to even hire a mover, much less, how to move someone. And so we had to get our hands dirty and learn the hard way. And so I went from working in this penthouse, my office was as large as my first home. It was really nice and probably too nice, but it was still very nice. And then I went to a place where I was inside of a normal office talking to customers on a regular basis, and they didn't know they were talking to the former CEO of a $40 million business. They thought they were talking to the local moving guy, which they were. And it was a bit of a, shock to the system, because it had been a while since I'd been on that end of the phone, because I had to go back 19 years when I was in
Yeah.
that role with Two Maids. So same thing happened. You think, well, it's round two, you're going to do all the things right that you did wrong the first time. No, we struggled right out of the gate. We made mistakes. We lost money longer than I had hoped we would. Not necessarily a repeat of the first experience, but there was a lot of similarities to it. But like anything, when you go through it, that pain is really a good thing if you can persevere and get through it. So it taught us a lot of things about how to treat customers and employees better. But most importantly, what it did was allow us to build a culture that's not just small business driven, entrepreneurial driven, but CX driven. That was what I wanted the focus to be from day one. I wanted it to be all about providing or delivering an experience that was better, more, just more positive. That's not something you think about when you think moving. And so that started at the most local, small level there is, with 5 movers sitting across from me in a conference room on the Monday that we opened in April of 2020. So it was the way I wanted to get started. And that way nobody can say, what is customer experience? What does CX stand for? What does that even mean? We make moving fun. Like, I wanted to own that from day one. And so we never relented there. We made a lot of mistakes. We didn't always make moving fun, but we always said that's who we are. And that was always the mission. It still is the mission, to always make this experience better and more positive.
So, Ron, tell me why CX as a differentiator, and did you have any background in CX? Were you a CX practitioner? Did you go to get certified in CX? Or tell me about why this became so important to you.
So it came from 2 places. One, just I saw from a personal perspective how poor of an experience it could be for someone. That was, my mother-in-law, combined with what I was trying to do on the back end of my time at Two Maids. I had just went all in on CX and had, read all the books, listened to all the podcasts, been to all the conferences, and tried to just digest as much as I could about customer experience, and tried to implement some of those strategies. Tried being the right word, because we didn't always execute on those. But I self-educated myself. I was very inspired by the Savannah Bananas story, which is, a baseball team. Jesse Cole's the owner there, and he, in my opinion, has reinvented the game of baseball to make it more about entertainment than competition. And it's working. It's even working better now than it ever has. But in those early days, he was still just this tiny little baseball team in Savannah, Georgia, which I'm from the state of Georgia, so it related to me easy. And I thought that we could do the same thing. Why can't we be the bananas of moving? Why can't we make moving fun just like the bananas made baseball fun? And so we just sort of looked at those models as inspiration. We didn't necessarily have all the structure or systems in place to pull that off and make it uniform and consistent, but we did have the culture. We did have the desire to do something that was way out there. So we started with the name. We wanted to be different, carried that through to a wild looking truck, to a crazy looking mascot, to all sorts of really fun things as well that sometimes flopped, but sometimes really worked out well for us too, So it was super fun during those early days, just experimenting with big things like the design of the truck to much smaller things like how do we greet a customer when we knock on their door for the move day.
All right. So I want to dig into that too, but let's do some framing here for a minute for the audience. So you started in April of 2020. Essentially, we're now, in the spring of 24, so roughly 4 years, a little bit less. How has it grown? Like, where are you now? However you measure that.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. This past 12 months has been unbelievable. We have always assumed that we would have a lot of interest in this because most people can relate to a negative move experience in their own life at some point. And so we felt like there would be demand there because of that, but we didn't really know how people would take to the idea of making moving fun. That's a big, ambitious goal. It's not for everybody, because if you're a franchise owner, that means that you're the leader, you're the boss. You have to bring that to life, and that's our expectation of you. And so you have to believe in that mission in order to become a franchise owner here. You can't just want to own a moving business that makes a bunch of money. It's great if you make a bunch of money, but that we really want that to be a byproduct of making moving fun. And so we didn't know how the market would react to the franchise opportunity, but it's taken off, honestly. We had so much interest in that first year, which was late 22 when we introduced it to the country, and we had to sort of slow it down. And we didn't slow it down quite enough because we opened probably too many too quickly in early 2023. And then we kind of took a break last year. We took a break for about 6 months and said, no more openings. Let's just focus on us, because forget CX for a moment. Just getting a business open, moving may seem simple. It's maybe not as complicated as building a software company, but any business is difficult to open. And so there's, in our world, a lot of regulations. And so we had to take people through that process, and we couldn't sell and do it. So we just took a break. So let's just focus on our guys. And then summertime last year, we said, all right, let's go back. Well, when we reopened it, the floodgates literally opened, because we had more interest than we had ever had before. We had a lot prior to that. And so we currently are open in 9 markets. We're about to be 10 next week. Next week, I don't know the timing of this, but next week will be 10 markets open. And then we have 8 more scheduled to open sometime between now and the summertime of 24. And on top of that, we are having twice a month sales meetings here in Birmingham in our corporate office, with loads and loads of franchise candidates showing up every time. We're literally begging for the opportunity, because there's so much interest in what we do from coast to coast. And so we are cognizant of that demand and respectful of that, but we also are trying to make sure that, one, we source the right owners. We want to make sure they believe in our mission of CX, but we also are limited in how we get people open. We don't want to just sell a bunch of franchises and then be forced to provide less than adequate training. Customer experience is not something that most people are familiar with. And so it takes a lot of really basic elementary education early on, but then you've got to pile on that. You've got to put it into action. You've got to learn from some of those things. It's different than most things, because most things you can push a button or click a box and stuff happens. Customer experience, while some of our stuff is very automated, a lot of it is manual. You've got to listen. You've got to observe. You've got to recognize the situation you're in. And that takes people buying into that for it to come to life. And so we don't want to open too fast, but we also know that we're hot right now, and there's a lot of people interested in the opportunities. So we're trying to measure that to make sure we don't get too far ahead of ourselves.
So, all right, a couple of questions. One is, first of all, congratulations on the success and the demand.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, that's terrific. You've done some things right. Secondly is, moving company. So what would you say to the critic who says, and you and I have talked about this, and there's always critics out there, right? But it says, gosh darn it, all you need to do is make a profit. You keep your expenses down, keep your revenues up, margins up, good margins, and you hire the right people or whatever, and you're going to be doing just fine. You'll beat your competitors. What would you say to that person?
Well, my biggest critic early on was my wife, not because there was some criticism of going back into business again, but she could get over that because she knows that's who I am. And so she would support it if I was selling dirt, but yeah. Her biggest critique early on was, hey, I don't think people want their moving experience to be fun. I think they just want guys to show up that are trained and honest and hardworking and bring a truck with them and call it a day, And so my response to that, I don't know if you've heard the Henry Ford quote, but many
horses in the cars.
Yeah. If you ask customers who drove the horse and buggies, like, how could they make that better? They'd say faster horses. Obviously, he went a whole other direction and built the automobile, and it changed the future for our entire world, And so that's the place I think we are with moving right now. Most customers don't really understand we make moving fun because they don't think it needs to be fun. But once they receive our experience, once they actually feel it, and then they can understand it. Now, not every move is fun, and so we can't always jump up and down. I mean, there's some divorce and even deaths related moves, and so we
Mm,
have to respect that situation. But if it's a more traditional full service move out of an apartment or a home, we're bringing the circus to town, and we put a smile on people's face, not just because it's fun. It is fun. It's happy, smiling moments, but what we're trying to do is to take the transaction out of the relationship. We want an actual, real, personal relationship with our customers because we believe that if we know them, if we have a bond with them, then it's okay to mess up. And when we mess up, we're not going to be fired. We're not going to be yelled at. We're not going to be threatened with a 1-star review on Yelp. We're going to talk to one another, and they're going to believe that we're on their side, that we believe in them. I always compare it to stuff like a family member. If you have a spouse who you call at lunch today and say, "Hey, tonight I'm going to cook this. I need this spice. Bring it home tonight." And the spouse is like, "Yep, I'll do that." But then walks into the kitchen and says, "Hey, honey, I'm home." And she says, "Where's the spice?" And you're like, "Oops, forgot it." You probably got to go get the spice, but you also probably don't get divorced. Like the relationship's not going to end. Nobody's going to get screamed at because of the mistake. But if you hired a food delivery service and said, "Bring that spice to me today by 5 o'clock because I need it to cook dinner," and they don't deliver, then you're done. The relationship is over. There is a divorce. And that's because the food delivery service is a stranger. It's a transaction, and you had one job, bring it or else. Whereas there's a relationship with the spouse. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to use fun, happy experiences to bring people closer to us, not because we want to mess up, but because we know we're humans. When you spend 8 hours with a move in someone's home, it's impossible to not make a mistake. It's impossible to not, let's say, show up a few minutes late or take longer than expected or break something by accident or, maybe act like you're not into it at some point. We don't want those actions to come back and hurt us because it's a stranger doing work for another stranger. We want to be friends. So we have fun. We put on a show. We do all sorts of fun things during the move, even before the move. We leave behind gifts. We feed people the night before for free. We play music throughout the move. Our mascot shows up. There's push-ups at some point during the move. There's even a funny dance that we do during the halftime part of our service. And so all of those things combined with the manual labor that we provide make moving fun.
That's really, really smart and really high social awareness of the reality of what the scenario is of a move. It's sort of like doing a journey map and using a persona of the typical customer, and the fact that, number one, they view you as a stranger, right? That's what's going through their classic journey map, going through their thoughts and their emotions. And then what am I expecting? I'm expecting probably something's going to get broken or something could get stolen.
Right.
Right, which you share with me. And so two things. One, whenever I'm cooking, by the way, I'm always going to need forgiveness. So to use that example, but I teach at Michigan State University in the CXM program, and the course I happen to teach is customer relationship management. And it's not about selling software applications. It's the whole thing from building trust, to earning trust, to building loyalty, and how we can automate and use automation to nurture the relationship as they go from service to loyal to advocate for us. And I just want to affirm what you're saying is because one of the things loyal customers, if they truly are loyal, the advantage of that is obviously they repeat purchase from you. Yes, they're less price sensitive, but maybe even more importantly, they're more willing to forgive you when things go wrong. And the reality is, I don't care what business you're in, things will go wrong.
Yeah, and we've proven that here. We're not perfect. I tell this to our franchise candidates. We're going to hire the same guys that 2 Men in a Truck is going to hire. We're hiring movers, and we're going to train them, using the same protocols and systems that other moving companies train them. What
Mhm.
we're going to do differently is we're going to teach them who we are and what our purpose in life is, what our mission for the brand is. And we're going to let them know they're an extension of that. And it's their job to do more than just move. We do expect them to want to put on a show. Jesse at the Bananas always tells this great story of how, it's a baseball team, but early on, it was kind of failing baseball team. It was this like all-star league where you went to show off for the pros. And if they saw you, you got a shot. Well, the first crew didn't know Jesse wanted to put on a show. They just wanted to play baseball. And so he's told them the deal. They thought he was crazy. Half the team quit. And, he had to go and scramble and figure that out. And he did, obviously. Well, today he has to turn a lot of people away. Like
Mm,
people get who he is now. So
mm.
that's my dream. That's my goal here at Pink Zebra Moving is that one day when we open in a new market, we've got people lining up to put on the show. We're still in the infancy of that right now and still trying to spread the gospel, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But that's the goal is that one day people are going to seek us out because of who we are and how they contribute to our brand's mission.
So a friend of mine and somebody I respect tremendously as a CX thought leader, Joe Pine, who wrote The Experience Economy, talks about how every experience is like a stage and in a theatrical event, and how we're going to be designing an experience for that audience. And it sounds like you've taken a page right out of that book in the way you organize this thing, because when you think about one of the last things that you would be, having a halftime and bringing in a mascot for and making fun, it would be a move like you. The argument would be some people even in our CX world would say, hey, they just want to get from point A to point B. And clearly you've proven that wrong. As I think about the way you design this, you've created a whole experience in an unlikely, home service arena.
Yeah. So I'm a big dreamer. And so I probably could have picked a easier goal. Maybe we could have just said we're going to show up on time and be professional and smile and not treat you bad. But I believe we should shoot high and long. And I don't want any of our franchisees to hear this, but let's for some reason say for a minute we don't reach it. Like we don't reach the mountaintop and we're not as crazy and fun as I hope we are and will be. But what if we get halfway up the mountain? What if we just reach
Hmm.
50% of the goal? Well, we're still 50% better than every other moving company in this country if we do that. So I choose to shoot high. And hopefully, I'm never going to stop until we get there. But if for some reason I fail and we only get halfway there, it's still a huge victory. And it does still change this industry. And it helps a lot of people in some really difficult situations. Moving's horrible. Like people hate it, right? It's other than death and taxes, it's probably number 3 and the worst things you want to go through. And so why
Yeah.
can't we make that better? Why has no one made it better in the 75 plus years that it's been an industry? That's why we're here. That's what we're hoping to do.
How cool. So two more questions, and then we've got to land the plane, although I could talk to you forever. One is, okay, so tell us about this name. How did you come up with Pink Zebra Moving?
Yeah. So I'm a huge reader / nerd of all business books. And one of my favorite, not one of my favorite book, it's now 20 plus years old. It's by Seth Godin,
Oh, yeah.
named Purple Cow.
Purple Cow.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a great book. It's a simple concept, and premise. If you see a pasture of cows, you drive past them, you never think much about them again. You probably don't even remember that moment in your life. But if you see a purple cow, then you're always going to remember it. Like years later, you'll say, "Oh, I remember that Friday afternoon I saw that purple cow." So as simple of a concept as that is, most businesses don't understand it. Most people, if you read the book, think hard work, capital, all those things are necessary. They are. But it's like saying all you need to live is blood, but that's not really living. That's called surviving. And
Mm.
so we agree with that principle. And we think that customer experience, we make moving fun, all the things we've been talking about is what separates us. That's our purple cow. And so Pink Zebra Moving is a bit of a homage to my love of the purple cow mentality. And, Seth's been a great mentor. I've never had a chance to meet him. I've talked to him a few times. He actually used us at Two Maids and a Mop one time, and it was just phenomenal. It was like serving a hero. And so that the name itself is a homage to that. Now it's also a play because in our industry, the industry moving is very male heavy, like super testosterone in brute force. A lot of guys are called muscle guys or whatever, and we said, look, we're going to be different than everybody in this industry. So let's just go the opposite. Let's use the least testosterone color there is. And we just owned the color pink. And then zebra is easy, right? You got an animal that has stripes on it. How can you miss that if it's on a truck? So we combined those two words, pink, zebra, and that fit the narrative when we're paying homage to Purple Cow, and we owned it and ran with it.
Wow. So I'm going to just call out three things that I picked out as gems that I don't want people to miss. And then I'm going to ask you kind of a final question, which I ask all my guests. But number one is, stick to your beliefs. What I picked up from you is that you believe in this idea of doing things differently, doing things where you believe the experience doesn't have to be lousy. In fact, when you see a lousy experience, it means there's an opportunity there. Two is, we didn't talk about this, but what you shared was the reality is it takes several years for a typical entrepreneur to start turning a profit and maybe even take a paycheck. And that's just the reality of it, even the second time around.
Yeah. If you said, Ron, start a business tomorrow, I would say, well, it's not going to take me as long this time. But it will. It always does. It doesn't matter how much capital you have or how much experience you have. Real life takes over and you mess up. You make mistakes, which is fine. That's the only way to get to success is to fail your way to the top. And so I would probably disagree with you if I was opening a business right now, but life would tell me that I'm wrong. And it's going to take too long.
And that's something I picked up from just listening to you. And, the last thing is, the experience can be a differentiator, and the long game is that, like you did with Two Maids, now Pink Zebra, and the other lesson there is to pause when you need to pause, like pay attention to those signals. But then now you've come off pause and you've got people anxious and you're blowing up. And the idea is, in the long run, if you're committed to providing different and exceptional experiences to your customers, and I mean committed to that to the point where, if a franchise owner doesn't play along, they might be out.
Yeah, I mean, there's some red tape there, but we try to get in front of that. We do try to find the people that believe. Everyone we talk to, honestly, is excited about it. Once we tell them the reality of what that means for them to bring it to life, then it gets less exciting sometimes, But if you believe in this, if you want to make people happy, if you want to change an industry, then we're going to fall in love with you just as much as you like us, So we're looking for those folks as we speak, and so far so good. We got some great franchise owners in our network right now.
Yeah, as you're talking there, so when you're interviewing or talking with these potential franchise owners, do you look for a cultural fit?
Yeah, now everybody's different. The leadership style, we're okay that being different. We have some franchisees that have a military background and their management style is very militant because of that, very strict. We have others that come from, more of a sales background and they're 100% focused on growth, and probably care a little bit less about systems. The leadership stuff, we're going to be okay as long as if that's who you are and that's how you want to lead, we're going to get behind it. What we don't have any wiggle room with is just the mission of the brand. You've got to believe there's a problem, and you've got to believe that you're a solution to that problem just as much as I do. And so that's something we ask people, prove it to us. I know it's easy to say yes.
Mm.
It's an easy yes. Who would say no to that? But prove it to us. Like what are you going to do? How are you going to bring CX to life inside your business?
Mm. Love it. Okay. Final question. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
That's a wonderful question. So I can only look at my experience as a way to answer this. And I've been fortunate to be able to actually make this work. I didn't know it at the time that it was a strong thing for me, but it turned out to be great. So I knew I used culture earlier and I said that's a buzzword. There's another buzzword you hear a lot called vision. Well, I'm going to use it here. I believe every entrepreneur has to not just have a vision. If you're building a business plan nowadays, they make you write that. You're going to have to draft your vision for the future, but it's got to be more than just words on a piece of paper. It's got to be a belief system. There will be dark moments. There will be headaches that you don't see coming. There will be really, really bad days, in fact, that you question yourself and you're going to look in the mirror and go, did I make the right decision? And that yes or no answer is everything. It may seem very innocent, uh, and there's no reason to be mad at yourself if the answer is no. But if the answer is no, I feel like that's something you should have asked yourself before you started the business. Do I have it in me? Do I believe that no matter what happens, this is where I'm going to be 10 years, 20 years from now?
Hmm.
Go all in and be obsessed with that vision and live by that vision every single day. And if you truly believe in that vision, then you don't have to worry about all the valleys. You don't have to worry about all the headaches. No, they're headaches. You got to deal with them. They're problems to fix, but they won't feel like the end of the world. They'll feel like it's just Tuesday morning. This is just what happens, because even if Tuesday is the worst Tuesday you've ever had, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter how fast you get to your dream. You just know you're going to get there and you believe it's going to happen and you're going to do it no matter what. You hear the word perseverance and grit and all that stuff all the time. You only persevere and stay gritty if you believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing, you're going to quit at some point. And so everybody should craft the vision. That's sort of a prerequisite nowadays. But really ask yourself, if the stuff hits the fan, am I really going to be prepared to overcome that? Is it going to ruin my day? Is it going to change decisions? Am I going to ever feel like I made a bad decision? Those are fine, healthy questions to ask, but I would ask those questions to myself early on, and don't expect perfection. It's going to not be perfect. But if you truly believe in that, I don't know when we're going to be called the world's first happy moving company, that we call ourselves that today. I don't know if it's 5 years from now, 5 months from now, or even 15 years from now, but I know it's going to happen. And so I don't care how long it takes. I've got enough belief in what I'm doing to know that even if we make mistakes over the next year over and over again, we're going to overcome next year and we're going to get there at some point. So craft a vision and really ask yourself, truthfully, do you believe that that's going to come to life?
Mm. Did you say the world's first happy moving company?
That's what we call ourselves.
All right.
We're excited about that. That's our category. I said earlier, we want to not just disrupt, but create a new category. We think there's these old school movers, and then there's these new school movers called happy movers, and we're the world's first one.
Well, thank you. What a great success story. What a pleasure having you on the show and hearing your story. Ron, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, either to speak or to use your services or to become a franchise owner, what would be the best way?
Yeah, so many ways. So number one, if you're a customer, we're in a bunch of markets now and growing. Experience the magic. Go to pinkzebramoving.com and you can get a quote real quick and book it as quickly. If you want to learn more about the franchise opportunity, also very easy, pinkzebramovingfranchise.com. In that site, you'll see what investment expectations are, what life's going to be like as a franchise owner, what we're going to do for you. And then if you just want to talk to me, my name's 2 syllables, Ron Holt. Find me on LinkedIn, and I'll engage and talk with you. I love I love the world of small business and entrepreneurship. So I love sharing my wisdom and experiences.
Ron, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah. Well, Mark, it's been a great pleasure and honor. I've enjoyed telling the story.
Thanks for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of my other ones, hit subscribe or follow. I've got a lot of other great guests that are coming up and a lot of other great content, and I don't want you to miss anything. You can find any links or references on the show in the show notes, and you can find those at my website at empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. Also, make sure to check out the other shows in the Agile Brand Podcast Network by going to www.agilebrandguide.com. The Delighted Customers podcast with Mark Slayton is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content.
The Agile Brand.